One moment. Alrighty. Looks like we're good to go. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us today on our April monthly meeting. My name is Brian Diaz, current chapter president. Good to see you all. Um, so just before we get started with announcements, just a couple of housekeeping things. Please make sure that your Zoom mic is muted. If you have some questions, there will be a question and answer session at the end of the presentation, or you can also type them in to the chat, and I'll go through. I'll make notes of questions so that they go to our presenter for this evening. And another thing too, so we are recording the presentation. So just if you have any qualms of having your face on potentially on the recording, just make sure that your video is off. And with that said, let me go ahead and share my screen. We can get some announcements. Can never find slideshow. Here we go. From beginning. All right. So there's a few things going on in the month of May. Starting on May 8th, there will be an Everglades chapter workday. So that will be at the Ernest F. Coe Visitor Center, and it will run from 9 a.m. to noon. So if you want to spend a Saturday morning getting your hands dirty, ripping out some invasive plants, making the visitor center a neater habitat, then feel free to join on that day. And if you are a new volunteer, then please contact Patty Fairs. Her email is shown on screen, because there's some paperwork that the park is requiring new volunteers to fill out before you're able to volunteer. Next, running from May 14th to 16th is the Florida Native Plant Society 40th Annual Conference. This year it will be a virtual event, of course, because of the pandemic, and it will be a $35 registration fee. You can find plenty more information and the agenda on fmps.org/conference/2021. There's going to be a mix of conferences. I think they're doing a silent auction for plants, and there's also going to be plenty of networking opportunities. So definitely catch the annual conference. On May 25th, we will have our next monthly meeting, same time at 7:30 p.m. Our presenter will be Christina Stocking, and she will give a presentation titled An Overview of Miami-Dade County's Environmentally Endangered Lands, or EEL, Covenant Program. On May 30th, there will be our next field trip, led by Steve Woodmansey. Still need to hammer out some of the details, including the location, as well as the time. So please stay tuned on the May newsletter, and also check the calendar and tune into social media for more information. We'll get that out as soon as possible. We do have our elections, our chapter elections, coming up in May. The exact date is also still to be determined. We're just trying to hammer out some of those details as well. If you'd like to nominate yourself for one of the open positions, please feel free to reach out to me. My email is briandiaz1210@gmail.com. You can find it in the chapter newsletter. So review that if you want to potentially run for the board. We do have plenty of new members, so bear with me. I have quite a few names to name. So welcome to the Dade chapter of the Florida Native Plant Society to Eliana Ardilla, Mark Kramer, Mary Benton, Asha Birch, Carmen Ferreiro, Riley Fortier, Paula McNicholas, Joe Moore, TJ Morell, Shannon Jones, Augusta Neal, Andrea Orozco, Nazy Sardui, Bar Werner, Colin and Laurel Worth, Jack Hart, Christina Santoyo, Ray Schooley, and Rachel Shearing. We're very pleased to have you guys on board, and hope that you guys can get much out of the chapter. And if you are tuning in and you are not currently a member, I highly encourage you to check it out. It's because of our membership that we're able to do the work that we do to protect and preserve the native plants and native plant ecosystems here in Miami-Dade County. And it's a very wonderful place to meet friends and to learn about plants, to network, to just get, there's a lot to get out of from the chapter. So I highly encourage you to check it out. For all of these announcements that I just gave today, and for plenty more happenings in the county and at our sister chapters, definitely take a look at the newsletter. There's plenty more information there. That's it for announcements. Now, before we get on to the main event, I just want to take a quick moment to give some recognition to one particular individual who has really helped make these monthly meetings that we've had virtually a possibility. You know, COVID throughout the last year has been very difficult for everyone, ourselves included. But we're very thankful to have been able to still offer these monthly meetings to our membership and to everyone else. We're hoping to get back to our regularly scheduled activities soon, but we're not quite there yet. But the success that we've had with these monthly meetings throughout this past year is very in large part due to Jeannie Rothschild, who has contacted speakers and made sure that they understood the virtual programming, and without that hard work that she's put in, we would have found it very difficult to offer these programs that we have. So if we could give Jeannie, who's on the call, just a virtual round of applause. Thank you so much for the work you've done, and it's really been paramount to being able to continue doing what we do. So thank you, Jeannie. That's it for announcements. So we can get on to our presenter today. So I'd like to introduce Jeff Wasielewski. Jeff, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And just to give you guys an introduction, so Jeff is the Commercial Tropical Fruit Extension Agent for UF IFAS Extension, Miami-Dade County. He has 25 years of experience working with tropical fruits in South Florida. He received his master's in education from the University of Miami and taught middle school in the public school system. He worked at Fairchild Tropic Botanic Garden in various positions, including grounds crew foreman, multimedia specialist, and the assistant curator of tropical fruit. He was also an adjunct professor of horticulture at Miami-Dade College for 11 years. Jeff has authored over 100 publications on South Florida horticulture and tropical fruit. Jeff, thanks again, and I will give you the floor. I think I might need to make you a co-host, so let me do that.
Thank you.
Let me do that quickly. All right, you're good to go.
Okay, let me share my screen. Classic Zoom. Let's see. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay, just checking. So thank you guys for having me so much. My name is Jeff Wasielewski. I work for UF IFAS Extension, Miami-Dade County. I want to thank Brian Diaz for having me and Jeannie Rothschild for inviting me. And I want to give a special thanks to Patty Ferris, because She's been doing this a long time. When I saw the newsletter still had her name on it, that was really something. So you guys should really be appreciative to her. So we're going to talk today about how to build a backyard paradise. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here because I've been to some of your yards and they blow my yard away. I was just chatting with someone in the audience today who has a spectacular yard that's 10 times as good as mine. But I'm gonna tell you what I know. So first of all, just a little Brian, can I ask how long do I have?
We usually run about an hour and a half.
Okay. I'll be under that. Okay.
Perfect.
So a little self-promotion. I do something about once a month called Tropical Fruit Tuesdays. We just did Tropical Fruit CSI. We're going to do planting tips and tricks. We're going to do Tropical Fruit IPM. And in July, we're going to do the mango in South Florida. These can be found on YouTube as well. I want to talk about UF IFAS Extension. We do have, University of Florida has an extension office in every single county, all 67 counties. We also have some research education centers, including the one in Homestead that I work near called the Tropical Research and Education Center. And the idea of extension is to take the research of the University of Florida and extend it out to our clients. So my clients are commercial tropical fruit growers, and I have a passion for natives and backyard paradises and things like that. So that's why I'm talking to you this evening. But my work is with commercial tropical fruit growers. So I like to start out a lot of my talks with this. Where should you get information? Because you're getting information from me tonight, but where can you get good information? A lot of you already know how to do it. University of Florida has a database called EDIS, E-D-I-S. So if you were to search UF space, EDIS space, propagation, you would get this EDIS on propagation. UF EDIS mango, you would get a really good EDIS on mango. So a lot of good information there, and it's peer reviewed, so you can't get it into EDIS without it going through a rigorous process. You can also get information from other universities by searching their name or searching the subject with EDU. YouTube is not a terrible place to get information. As you know, it's great, lots of information. You actually see it. Watch 2 or 3 videos of something, you can learn how to do it. My girlfriend asked me to put in a sink in her kitchen, and I was like, sure, no problem. I had no clue how to do it. So I went to YouTube, boned up, and I went in there and got it done. So YouTube is good. I have TFT there because all the Tropical Fruit Tuesdays are there. If you go to YouTube and search in the YouTube search bar for Tropical Fruit Tuesdays, you'll find it. Master Gardener is another great place to get information. I should have put this, but obviously plant groups like yourself, excellent place. I think the #1 place to get information is your own garden or your grove. A lot of you guys know that, but if you go in your garden and you pay attention and you walk it every day or a couple times a week, you're going to learn more than you learn from me. You're going to learn more than you learn online or from any classes. And finally, in this day and age, let's beware of the source of where we get our information. So yeah, you could trust me with my information. I'm old. This is when I met Patty Ferris, when I was about many, many years ago and many pounds ago. So I've been doing this a long time. For those of you that are young, that thing in my hand is called chalk. That's a chalkboard. And I'm wearing what are called jorts, jean shorts. So this is much better live. You get chuckles. Okay, so some of the concepts we're going to go over today. Not all of them, but some of them. Right plant, right place. Low input, high output. Back versus front of your yard. Make a plan. Sun versus shade. Levels. Inside versus outside. focal points, texture, complementary colors, hardscape, and if you plant it, they will come. So the number one thing for any talk I give is right plant, right place. If you put the right plant in the right place, whether it be a native or something that acts like a native or whatever it is, it's going to work. If you put a royal palm, which is a native, in the middle of a median where it's really dry, and royal palms like it a little wet, that's the right plant in the wrong place. So here we have probably my favorite plant in the world, Lignum vitae, a native that a lot of you I'm sure know. But look at it here. I found it in the parking lot of a Thai restaurant in this little tiny area. No irrigation, no fertilizer, but thriving. That's what it likes. It likes to be dry. It likes to be in a little, it can be in a little area because it's very slow growing. So that is the right plant in the right place. So somebody was making some noise there, so I just muted them. So right plant, right place, right plant, wrong place. So here we have my beautiful bromeliad and a foxtail palm that was over it. Not a bad plant, but it drops these big fronds, just like a royal would. So right plant, wrong place. So here's a quiz for you, and I can't see the chat, so this might not work, but this orchid here, is this right plant, right place? Okay, I will give you the answer. It is the right plant, and I thought it was the right place, but because it's in the crotch of the gumbo limbo, and the gumbo limbos are pretty, this is in my yard, gumbo limbos are pretty weak. I feel that over time, this is gonna rot out the area and cause weakness. So it's beautiful for now, but I wish I would have put it in an oak. So I'm gonna give this right plant, wrong place, foul on me. Okay, so I like natives. I love natives. My yard is full of natives, but I also like plants that act like a native. So you don't have to be a native to make it into my yard, but you do have to act like a native. You have to have very little fertilizer, to no fertilizer, no irrigation, no pesticides, very little work from me as in pruning. So, and of course you can't seed all over the place and be super vigorous. So if you act like a native, you're gonna make it. Number one thing besides, or number two thing besides right plant, right place, for me, I want low input plants that give high output. Low input, high output. So I don't have to do a lot, but they give me a lot. So in the left, we see Brunfelsia nitida, which is a beautiful small shrub that flowers in the shade, and that gives me flowers. It gives me, and it also gives me aroma. So it's giving me two things, and I've probably had that in the ground 15, 20 years, and it's in the shade, it still flowers, and I've probably pruned it twice. So super low input. I've never watered it. I've never, except when it was planted, I've never fertilized it. So, and then we have obviously the firebush. So firebush gives you flowers, butterflies, hummingbirds, other birds coming to the fruit. I mean, firebush is a winner. So low input, high output. This is what you want. Excuse me. You can also think about hardscapes. So hardscapes are things like decks, trellises, tables. So here you see a little table that my daughter and I built, but you have the native sea grape over it. And I've let the sea grape kind of go out and then down. I didn't prune it. So it has this really nice arch to it. And you see I'm getting all that free mulch from the sea grape. So very great plant and good way to use hardscape. And this is not something you want around your pool though, the sea grape, obviously for the reasons of all the leaves. So here is hardscape again. We have chairs, we have a deck. There's the Brunfelsia again, and there's little Brookie. So when you're doing your landscape, when you're trying to build a backyard paradise, start with a plan. It doesn't matter if you end up doing exactly what you had in the plan. I had a million plans going in, and I've changed over the years. This is a landscape that doesn't really have a plan. There's just something here, something there, something there, something there, no plan. So have a plan, and I'm going to tell you some sort of ideas that will help you with your plan. So one thing you want is this is a video that I'm going to show you. Hopefully this will work. And what I'm showing you is sort of the end result of my plan. So my plan was, I had my house, and in the back of my house, I have a Florida room where it's all windows. So I wanted to be able to look out, have some space so I could see, and then have just a total area that's blocking off the neighbors. And I don't have a lot of property. I have a little less than half an acre. I'm in Kendall. You know, this is not down a homestead with 5 acres. So what I decided to do is I had the space in between my house and the planting, and then I did sort of a U-shaped planting bed all the way around, and I put anchor trees of oaks, gumbo limbos, sea grapes, and I planted those as seedlings. And then I mixed in all kinds of other, primarily natives at the beginning, all the stoppers, firebush, myrtle of the river, Florida boxwood, you know, all that stuff. So we're going to take a quick look. We're going to go from left to right in my yard in the back. So we're in the backyard, and we're past the area that's open. And remember, I keep the area open so you can see everything. It's not just like a jungle. Okay, here we go. So we have texture here. We got some firebush, but you see all the privacy. Bahama swamp bay or swamp bush. Got an oak. Got some texture there with anthuriums. Got my daughter's gumbo limbo. Got my pond that I need to get working on. Got some clerodendrons that are not supposed to be there. Got my bird feeder for my buntings. More firebush that's everywhere. Some aeroids, more clerodendron that I need to get out, some firebush, another gumbo. But you see the privacy, big lignum vitae there, and that's what we have. So imagine that is just sort of your background. So that's your background that allows you to have privacy, but also gives you tons of birds, tons of butterflies, and it's easy. It's not a lot of work. So another thing I want you guys to think about when you're starting your landscape, and this is something that catches all of us in the end, is the initial size of your plant and the spacing, and how big is that plant going to get. So what we're looking at right here is a little planting I just did at my parents' house yesterday. And you can't even see it because I am trying to think for the future. I'm not filling it up now because I want it to grow. So right there, right there, right there, and right there, we have some ground cover, and here, here, and here, we have some Persian shields that are hopefully going to get up a little, but not too high. So in my yard, I gave a tour to the Native Plant Society a long time ago, and I remember someone, I forget who it was, but they looked around and they said, it'll be interesting to see what happens here, because I think you have too much, you're gonna get shaded out. And that sort of happened because that open area that I have in between my house and a little planting, then the open area, and then the border, the U. That used to be grass, and now grass won't grow there anymore because there's so much shade. So I mulched everything. So that was sort of my solution, but I certainly am running out of space. Okay, so this is a good example. This is the front of my house. This is a good example of where I actually gave things enough space. So on the left, you see the early plantings. So we have the dwarf Fakahatchee grass here. We have the Pseudophoenix sargentii here, little croton here. And then this is a Jamaican caper that a bird actually planted, but it was in a good spot, so I left it. So now we look to the future over here on the right. We have I put in a big bromeliad here, the Variesia. We have the Pseudophoenix is growing well. And I don't think Pseudophoenixes mine is gonna last that long. So I planted back here. This is a Leucothrinax Mauricii, a beautiful native palm. So I'm thinking this is gonna take over for this once this doesn't make it. But here you have the Fakahatchee grass, which I cut down once or twice a year and it comes back. Here's the Jamaican caper that I've sort of shaped. So you see everything still has plenty of space. You can still see everything. Next topic I want to give you is the backyard versus the front yard. Okay, the front yard is for your neighbors. The front yard is for them to look at. You're going to see it when you pull up, but it's not where you're going to spend your time. The backyard, that's for you. That's where you put the things that you really going to enjoy, that are going to give you the birds, that are going to give you the butterflies, that are going to give you the color, going to give you fruit, going to give you aroma, all those things. I like to put those in the back because that's where you're going to spend your time. So this is just showing you Jamaican caper and how beautiful it can be. I think it's really a highly underused plant and it really deserves to be used more. Another plant that I think is highly underused is the lignivite. I think if we put those in the places where they're putting oaks and royal palms, we'd be in pretty good shape in the medians. Okay, I was asked to talk a little bit about planting and protecting your plants. So when you do make your plan and you've chosen your plants and you're going to put them in the ground, one thing you want to do is protect them, because the weed whacker guy and or girl is out there and they're looking for your plants. So don't let them get weed whacked. You can use mulch like I did here on the left. You can use rocks like I did here on the right, just the natural rocks that came out of the ground. You can just pull away the grass from around the plants. That will work too. But you want to keep it protected from lawnmowers and from weed whackers. Even if you're doing the weed whacking yourself, this picture on the right is a mango tree, a rosy gold mango tree in my yard. And I know better than to weed whack something, but I'm still need to protect it from myself. So this is what happens when you don't protect your plants. Remember, I'm a commercial tropical fruit extension agent. So I get called out to fruit groves, and this is one that the owner was very good at growing avocados, but they were planting young avocados. They had an orchard, but they were planting smaller avocados, about 5 or 6, and they kept dying. So I went out to take a look. So what we're looking at here is an avocado that I pulled out of the ground and laid it on the ground. So we're looking at it from up above. And can anybody guess what killed this? I think we can. So it was planted at the right depth. If we look here, we see the flare roots. So it wasn't planted too deep, but it was continuously weed whacked and girdled. So that was an easy way to find out what was killing their plants. And why don't we want to weed whack? Because most plants that you have are going to be dicots, and dicots have this on the inside of them. If you look at them on the left, we're looking at a dicot that's like an oak or a mahogany, gumbo limbo. Those are all dicots. If we're looking at it from above, we cut it, and on the right, we're looking at it from the side. So what it has is the phloem on the outside, the xylem on the inside, and the cambium in between. Cambium makes phloem and xylem, and xylem, the water and nutrients go from the roots up to the leaves. They go up. In the phloem, things go down. The energy that the tree makes to feed itself goes down to the roots. So if we cut that phloem, you're really starving the tree. So that's what happens. That's why it's so bad. This is also the way you make an air layer, by the way. You trick the plant into thinking that it needs to make roots, and you put sphagnum here, and lo and behold, you get a plant. Okay, next topic. Sun and shade. You have to know where your sun is going to be and where your shade is going to be. So always remember the north side of your house, or the north side of a big sea grape, the north side of anything is going to be in shade near that object. There's going to be shade almost 100% of the year. So a lot of shade there. So you plant things there that can take the shade. Everywhere else, especially when you're starting out, is completely full sun. As you get a canopy, you get more shade. So what we're looking at here is Monastera deliciosa. And this is not only a beautiful aroid that gives you texture, but it has a fruit that you can eat. And it's super easy to grow. I've never watered these. I've never fertilized them. What I do need to do is they do move. They move, they grow out. So what we're looking at here is they've grown a little too wide. I have a path right here where the mouse is. So I need to take this one out. So if I take this one out, I can plant it somewhere else very easily. I can give it to a friend. But this area, you can see all the shade. There's shade here because there's a big sea grape over it. And then over here, this is the north side of my house. So that's where I have my deck and my trellis, because I'm shaded, for the entire of the year. So let's move on. I was also asked to talk a little bit about the soil. I'm sure a lot of you guys know, but by the way, the new membership, that list, the new membership was so impressive. I would like to know if that's in the last month or year or 10 years. That was so many people. That was fantastic.
That was the last month. Very heartening to see. Yeah.
You guys are killing it. That's amazing. You guys are doing great.
Thank you so much, Jeff.
Yeah. So you do have a lot of new members. So we'll talk a little bit about our soil. So here on the left, we're looking at a soil map of South Florida. So right here where the mouse is, that's US 1 that goes up here. So we know that's US 1. And then here's Homestead right here. So up this area here is like Pinecrest over here. So what you're seeing is the green is a higher elevation. That's more like your pineland. That's higher elevation, and that's oolitic limestone right here, what you see. The yellow here, this is called marl, and marl is also limestone, but it's limestone that's been washed over by water over and over and over, so it turns into like a gray clay. So you have the marl out here in what's called East Glades, and then you have all these little marl, what used to be marl prairies, and now that, of course, with the drainage, you can't see any of this. But every once in a while, when you're digging, or you'll see marl in these areas. Like my parents' house when I was younger is right somewhere around here. So I would dig holes all day long, and I would hit like a little builder's fill, and then I'd hit marl, and I'd be like, this is so easy. And then I went everywhere else. I was doing landscaping, I was doing all kinds of things, and I was digging holes. And I was like, this is so hard. And that's why, because there was a little marl area right there. And if you go down to the Everglades, if you guys have ever been in the Long Pine Key, and there's trails that you go out and you're walking through the pinelands, then you get out to these open prairie areas, and then you see pines further in the distance. So that area is a low-lying area, and that's where the marl is. And that's like seasonally flooded. Maybe more than you want to know. So our soil is mostly oolitic limestone. We do have a tiny bit of elevation. This is a commercial mango grove that I went to. You see I had to drive my truck actually up a little. You can still see some elevation in areas like off of Old Cutler. You can see like the little rock ridge there. So the elevation is mostly gone now because of all the canals and things like that and filling in. But here, this was elevation. Not much, not much. If you've ever been to Montgomery Botanical Center, they have a nice escarpment where you can see probably the highest point in Miami, which I think is probably, I don't know, 18 feet, maybe 20, not including Mount Trashmore. So it's not a lot, but that little bit of change in elevation does change the plants, as you will see if you go to Long Pine Key and hike around. So just a public service announcement. It is limestone that we have, oolitic limestone. It's not coral. It's not coral is down in the Keys. Coral is under the water. There is coral in the Keys, but there's mostly limestone here. So don't say that you hit coral when you dig, and don't say coral gables. It should be limestone gables. So just don't say coral castle. Say limestone castle. I've written tons of letters, but nothing works. Again, better live. When you dig your hole, check the roots. If they're wrapped around, break them up. If you have a really big root that's sort of girdled, I would cut that root. And of course, this is the tool you're going to use to dig. Shovels are just not going to work. I was in Jacksonville to see my sister and brother-in-law, and we were putting in a little bit of podocarpus, and he brought out just a shovel, and we dug in sand, and it was so easy, and I couldn't believe it. Not what we have here. Okay, back to our sort of ideas about landscaping. Another thing I want you to think about, besides what we've already talked about, is levels. You want to have levels in your landscape. You don't want it all to be one flat wall. I do have that in the back, so you can have that, for privacy. I call that an informal hedge. But think about levels. Think about how tall things are going to be, and you kind of want, obviously, taller things in the back and lower things in the front. If you guys hear like a chewing sound in the background, that's my dog. He's got a big bone, buddy. So another thing to think about is outside and inside. You want it to look good on the outside, but when you're on the inside, you want it to look good too. So here is an Encephalartos that was sort of, it lost its tag when I worked at Fairchild. So they gave it to me. It was really small, and it's grown beautifully. This is probably 20 years old, but it's really nice because it sits right there in front of my house. And when I look out the windows in the front, you can see it, and it makes a really nice silhouette. So think about what you're going to see when you're inside, when you open up those blinds. So outside, inside. We already saw this view on the left. That's the outside. But in the inside, I was so lucky to find this house in Kendall that had this Florida room. And I knew, and there was nothing here. Every plant you see, I planted it, except for one oak that's in the front yard. But I was so lucky to have this room that had these windows. So I decided that I would just make a paradise with these windows so I can look out and see that. And we saw Brookie. So here's Alex taking a snooze. Still snoozing. So another thing to think about is focal points. So here's another window that I look out, and I made a mistake and took it only from the inside and not the outside, but we can use this picture to show focal points. So when you look out this window, your eye is drawn to these red tea plants here. Your eye is drawn to this Cocothrynax here. Your eye is drawn to the trunks of the gumbo limbo and the sea grape. So these are focal points. We have some hardscaping here, which are some herons, which you can't quite see, but they're just metal herons. So these are focal points. So keep that in mind as well. Balance. Sometimes you want balance. If you have a more formal landscape, you want to have it balanced. We're working on the front extension landscape very slowly because we have no funds and very little labor, but we're working on it. And we're the very front, we're trying to keep it balanced. Where the middle to the left and the right, it's the same. So lignum vitae on the far left, lignum vitae on the far right, and everything kind of balanced. So this is classic balance here. I think it was William Lyman Phillips that designed Fairchild Tropical Botanic Garden. I'm sure you guys have seen, most of you have seen this view, the Bailey Palm Glade. So definitely balanced. You can see that when you look at this. And if you happen to be able to put in a water feature and 3 big lakes, do that too. Texture. I've mentioned texture a couple times, but I want to formally introduce it. You want to have some texture. So you get texture from all kinds of things. Little leaflets of the native tamarind, you get texture there. You get texture on your thatch palms. You get texture on aroids. But texture is a feature that you can have. You don't want all texture, but you want some texture here and some texture there. So here is some nice texture with a focal point. So in the front, we have wild coffee. And I swear to you, I probably planted 2 wild coffee plants in my yard initially. And right now, I probably have 150 because they seed everywhere, and a lot of places I'll just let them grow. So that's a plant that if it wasn't a native, it would be super invasive. But we love it because it does bring in the birds. It's got texture, and it's a nice thing that grows in the shade and looks well. Something that I like to think about sometimes are complementary colors. So if I'm going to do a landscape with flowers, I want there to be complementary colors. So if I have yellow flowers like Thryallis, I would want to match that with the purple of a lignum vitae. If I'm going to have red flowers, obviously you can mix that with the green because there's green everywhere, but red goes well with white as well. So this is something to think about. It's not a rule, but it's something to think about when you're putting things together. What you don't want is this whole color wheel all together. You don't want that. You don't want 10 different crotons that all are different all in one spot, unless you like that. But I don't think it will look great. So here's sort of some matches of complementary colors. Hardscape, I'm pretty sure I already have this slide. So water features are fantastic if you can do them. You can have something as little as a bird bowl, or you can have a pond like this. This is my pond that is now a pit. So it's a pond at this point in the picture. but it needs some work. But while it was alive, while it was still kicking, it was incredible because I had little waterfall here that gave me sound. And then I had all this area where birds and fish could be, and frogs and turtles and things like that. Another thing I wanted to talk to you about is if you plan it, provide it, they will come. So here we have some terrible pictures because I took them with my phone from inside the house. But here we have the bird bath, which I couldn't think of the name of a second ago. I called it a bird bowl, just so you know. But what we're looking at, very small right there, is an indigo bunting, the only one I got this year. And I know someone in the crowd gets tons of indigo buntings. I'm very jealous of him and his wife. Here is a spot-breasted oriole. So this one is here because of the plants I have. The indigo bunting is here because I put out a feeder of millet specifically this time of year for painted buntings and indigo buntings. So if you provide it, and this water source, I fill it up about once a day with fresh water. And the birds, when that fresh water comes, they really enjoy it. The cardinals, the mockingbirds, the catbirds, the buntings, the warblers, they all check it out. But if you plant it, they will come. If you put in the stoppers and you put in things that, and the wild coffee and things like that, the birds and the butterflies will come. The hummingbirds will come. And it's fantastic. So here's another terrible picture, but you see my feeder at the top right, and then barely in the middle, you can see a male painted bunting. And this is an oak. Again, we have some monstera in the shade. And here is a seedling of a Simpson stopper that is the right plant in the wrong place, and I can't bring myself to get it out of there because it is a Simpson stopper and I love it. But you know, I don't want this Simpson stopper covering up the oak, and I don't want it getting in the way of the feeder. So I'm gonna have to trim that down a little. I know it's bad, right? So here's another little guy that showed up. I think it's called a blue-black warbler. I also get red starts. And remember, I'm in the middle of Kendall. I can hear the freeway from my yard. But I get all these guys because I provide what they want, and I don't spray pesticides. That to me is important because remember, I'm doing, first of all, low input, high output. So not putting the input of pesticides is a big, big thing for me. My daughter grew up in this house. You know, she's 20 now, but she was born here. And I wanted it to be okay for her to go in the yard and touch anything and not have to say, oh no, I just sprayed something on there. But another thing about not spraying pesticides is you get all the insects. They're still there, and the birds come for the insects. So that's important. And not spraying pesticides, you also get a lot more natural predators that take care of the pests. So I think it's really beneficial not to spray, or try your best not to spray. I don't spray anything in my yard. I won't. Okay, I think this is sort of the end. I didn't do a good job of looking what time I started, so we're getting towards the end. So informal hedges. I want to finish up with informal hedges and formal hedges. So we have the formal hedge that was everybody knows about from the past, called the ficus hedge. I hated the ficus hedge before it started going downhill because of the ficus whitefly, but I hated it because one ficus benjamina is a 50-foot tree, and you're trying to keep it as a hedge. That means you're constantly pruning, you're constantly keeping it small. The roots are going to be too big. It's just a mistake. So clusia has taken the place of the ficus hedge. Clusia I'm a little bit okay with because it grows slower. It does a great job of what it needs to do, But when you look at it, it's like a green wall. You might as well have a fence there. And it's not going to bring you birds. It's not going to bring you butterflies. It's just not. So what about an informal hedge? Here we have on the left, we have Florida boxwood, which is the third plant I'm going to talk about that I think is just brutally underused, criminally underused. It's such a great plant. You see, look at its shading. You can't even, or screening my daughter's window there. You can't even see it because of this beautiful Florida boxwood. And I trim it to keep it small, but I don't trim it with a hedger. I trim it with loppers. So I just selectively prune it. And then you see a thatch palm on the right. So this is you can't see what's behind it. This is a hedge. So this is an informal hedge. You can do this with stoppers. You can do this with all sorts of different things. With firebush, you can make an informal hedge that gives you privacy. It does exactly what a clusia hedge will do, but it gives you birds and butterflies, and you don't have to pay someone to trim it once a month. So we're going to look at that same video again, and you're going to now think of it as this informal hedge that I talked about. So right here, we're looking at, I can't remember the name of this anthurium. Anthuriums are great because they usually stay in their place for the most part. And they give you lots of texture. They grow great in the shade and they don't need any extra input. And this is a Jamaica thatch palm right here. And then right here, this is a Bolnesia, which is a taller tree that shades my trellis. Okay, we're going to look at it again and think of this as an informal hedge. So there you have the firebush. You can't see the neighbors. You can't see them. That brings me hummingbirds right there. You can see a little crack there. Remember, I only have a half acre. This is not some huge monster property. You can see a little hole there. You can see a little light back there, but it's really pretty private. There's the malignant variety. And way off to the right, we have the fruit section, which I didn't walk through. But look at the privacy. So I don't need to pay somebody to prune my hedge. And I also get tons of birds and tons of butterflies, as I've said like a million times in this talk. Okay, so here, this is very unusual. Here we have a Publix parking lot, and we have a native here, which if we were doing this live, I would definitely ask what it is. And about 10 of you would know it right away. This is a white stopper right here. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. I know it's a stopper, but I think it's a white stopper. So they're using it as a little hedge here. This is a more formal hedge, but it's a native. So it's not going to grow, as fast as a, as a ficus or clusia. And, it's a native, so it doesn't need anything. It doesn't need fertilizer or water, this particular native. So we talked about Lignum vites being so underused. We talked about Florida boxwood being underused. This is another one that's really underused, Jamaica caper. Here it is as a hedge. This is one of the clients I went to, but they had this as a hedge, and I asked them if I could take a picture of it. So I thought it was amazing because this is a formal hedge of Jamaican caper, which you saw earlier in pictures. I use it as a focal point in the front of my yard, but in the back, I use it for screening. Cocoa plum. This is another native that is a good hedge. Here we have another, this is a fourth plant that is so underused. It's not a native, but it acts like a native. This is bay rum. So I should have put in a picture of the trunks because the trunks are just absolutely gorgeous. They're in the Myrtaceae, so they have that sort of what guava trees look like, that peeling bark. But this is at the Fruit and Spice Park. Shout out to Louise King. And this is just a beautiful hedge of these trees. And the one great thing about them, these bay rums, is you go up to the leaf, you break off a leaf, and you smell it, and it just has a heavenly aroma. So it gives you that. It gives you just beautiful screening. You can't see what's behind there. Excuse me again. So there you go. Okay, so we'll look back at our concepts. Right plant, right place. Remember that. That to me is the key. These first two, if you remember nothing, remember this. Right plant, right place, and low input, high output. Oh, height output. I got an extra T in there. Back versus front, how the back of your yard is for you, the front of your yard is for the neighbors. Make a plan. It doesn't have to be a detailed plan. Just sort of know what you want. Sun versus shade. Make sure you know where the shade is going to be. So you plant things that like the shade in the shade. Levels. Have your levels, or think about levels. Inside versus outside. You want it to look good when you're outside, but you especially want it to look good when you're inside, because that's where you're going to spend a lot of time. Have focal points. Have texture. Try to use complementary colors. Use hardscapes where you need them, and if you plant it, they definitely will come. I want to thank you guys for your time, and the third dog has made an appearance, Buddy with Mango.
Thank you so much, Jeff.
Thank you. Let me stop sharing here.
I'm jealous of the folks who went on that tour of your yard. I'd love to see it up close.
Well, Patty has asked to come back to the yard, and I told her no because my deck was falling apart. But the deck is fixed now. The pond is not, so I invite you guys to come for a tour if you want. I'll definitely have you guys if you want.
Well, maybe a July yard visit might be in order.
Not the best time of year to be outside, but whenever you want to come, sure. I'll have mangoes then.
Awesome. Well, does anyone have any questions for Jeff? I'm not sure if I saw any on the chat, although a few compliments on your landscape. If you have questions, you can feel free to unmute yourself and ask them. You don't have to type them.
I have a question. The anthurium, is that the, native? And is,
go ahead.
Is it the one that looks like an elephant ear? Is that the one you were referring to?
I have a bunch of anthuriums. I have a bunch of different, or I have a couple of anthuriums and I have a bunch of aeroids. I don't know my aeroids and anthuriums that well, so I can't tell you exactly what they are. I've got some of them from Fairchild. I bought some of them. I have a big variety of aeroids, but what I like, and anthurium is an aeroid, what I like about them is they give you that texture, they kind of stay in place, and they're really easy to propagate. So if you guys were to come to my yard and you saw an aeroid that you really liked, I could take my saw right then and there and cut a piece and give it to you, and you could have it for your own. Now the anthurium's not as much, but the seeds of those grow well, but most of the other aeroids, you could cut a chunk of it and give it away.
Thank you.
Sure.
Jeff, Jeannie asked a question on the chat. She asked, what was the planting that turned out better than expected? I think you had mentioned.
I'm not sure what that refers to. Jeannie, can you elaborate?
Was that the coffee maybe?
Well, I don't know. If you want to type more, you can, but I will tell you a plant that turned out much better than I expected was my sea grapes. I collected seed from the Miami River Inn, and I grew the seeds in pots and I planted them. and now they are, 50 feet tall by 80 feet wide. And because of the hurricanes we had, I don't remember the year, but it was the year of Katrina and Wilma. They kind of pushed off to the south a little bit. So they have this big arc to them. And I've let them go all the way touching the ground. So you have this big arcing, huge sea grapes. And that has turned out way better than I thought. And actually, I didn't know what I was doing when I planted them, but they are shading the entire Florida room because they're to the south of the Florida room. So the north is the Florida room. So they shade the Florida room. So that was something that I kind of lucked into. I fell into that. I didn't know that was going to work out so well.
And
actually, Jeff,
lived in that house? I mean, when did you start working on your landscaping?
I'm sorry, I couldn't quite make you out.
How long have you been working on your landscaping?
That's
How
a
many
great,
years?
that's a great question. The answer is 22.
Wow.
So I bought the house in 1999. There was nothing here. And I just started planting seedling gumbos and seedling oaks and seedling sea grapes and putting in stoppers. And as I went, I just added. And once I started getting shade, I put in the aeroids. I have, fruit trees. I have, all the stuff that we were looking at. But it's been a process for sure. This doesn't just happen. But it's been looking really good for, for at least 10, 12 years. It's not like it just now is great, but it's great being in the Florida room and just sitting out and looking. I mean, that's my television. That's the room I spend all my time. So I'm just lucky.
It's beautiful.
Thank you.
And Jeff, with your fruit trees, do you do the same thing where you have just different layers of structure, like understory stuff and small trees in between, or is it just the fruit trees on their own?
They're mixed, but they need a lot of sun. So I don't put my principles of building a backyard paradise, the landscaping principles. I protect them and I give them space and I give them sun. That's what they need to really thrive. So, and I prune them to keep them, not too crazy, not too tall. But that area doesn't look like the rest because it needs to be spaced out a little.
Okay. And a second question, if I may. So here in my home, I'm working with very limited space for planting. I have maybe a couple hundred square feet that I've tried planting almost exclusively with natives. I'm actually running out of planting space. And in my backyard, along the fence, what I've tried to do is put, more of the shrubs and a couple of small trees, and then up in front of that, in kind of the sunnier area, some wildflowers, native grasses, things like that. But I'm wondering, so in your experience, at some point, does the shade just outcompete maintenance? Like at some point, do you say, okay, I wanted to keep this area sunnier, but the amount of pruning or the number of times I have to come out here to keep it in check is becoming too much. Let's just let it do what it does. What's been your experience?
Good question. And the answer is it depends what you plant, because you saw the picture of the front of my house. Mm-hmm. Tons of sun, tons of space, slow growing things, so even there in the front of that, there's a little bit of grass, which isn't really grass. It's more like Biden's, but in front of that, so that way you can look and see the house and such. But that area is small where the plants are, and you see everything still kind of spaced out. So it is possible to do, mm-hmm. But in the backyard where I planted all these seedling gumbos, oaks, and sea grapes, that was what got me, is they grew. They mm-hmm. grew really well and they grew together. So the middle of the area got shaded out. So depending on what you plant in your yard, you got to just think, are you going to have taller things that are going to go over the other things? If you want that, then do that, but you're going to lose those grasses and you're going to lose those wildflowers and things like that. That was something I always wanted to do, was have a little wildflower meadow, and I just couldn't. I couldn't get it going. I wanted to
Yeah.
have that. I might still try it, but I tried it. I threw seeds out and it didn't work. So I think I'm gonna have to sow the seeds in and plant them.
Okay. Yeah, I
Yeah.
suspect that might happen over time. I don't know if it was a mistake to plant a false mastic in
That's
such a small space,
yeah, you're
but it
done.
might.
You're done. Your yard is gonna
That's
be
gonna
just
be
a
pretty
mastic.
big.
Yeah, you're done.
Right
got
tree,
a
right
tree
place.
house.
And then Leslie has another question in the chat. I don't know if you have it open.
Yeah. So Leslie says, what are some fruit plants that can be grown from seed? Loquat is one I want. Also, how long did it take for the seed grape you planted to fruit? That's a good question. That's in my wheelhouse, tropical fruit and fruit. So you could grow many fruit trees from seed, but here's the problem with that. Let's say you wanted to grow a mango. If you have a Glen mango, your neighbor has a Glen mango, tastes delicious, you want that. They give you the fruit, you plant the Glen mango seed. When that seed starts to grow, it's got to go through all the stages of sexual maturity because it's a sexual propagation. It's not grafting, which is the way you typically do mangoes, which I'll talk about in a second. That's a vegetative propagation. So you grow from seed, it's got to go through all the stages of sexual maturity. So it takes 10, 12 years before it's ready to bloom and fruit. If you take a piece of that glen and you graft it to a seedling, that piece of the glen is going to be already sexually mature. So it can flower and fruit in 2 to 3 years. So that is one thing. A second thing is that seed is like a child. It's a mix of the mother and the father, the seed. So it's not going to be a glen. It has a glen as a mother, but we don't know who had coffee with that mother and that was the father. It could have been Tommy Atkins, could have been an Edward, it could have been something. So the seedling is not going to be what you wanted. You take the graft and you put that onto a seedling, that's asexual propagation. That's a clone of the glen. So you're going to get the glen. So that sort of answers some of your question, but your main questions were, what are fruit plants that you can grow from seed? You can grow them all from seed, but the ones that will work well are jackfruit is one. I can't think. So lychee, no. You would do that air layer. Longan, no air layer. Canistel, I guess you could, but you probably graft. Sapodilla, you could, but you should probably graft it. Avocado, a lot of people grow avocados from seed, but it's going to have those same issues I told you about with the mango. Guava, I think you should air layer that. So most of them you're going to want to do a type of asexual propagation, which is, like cuttings, air layers, and grafting.
And what about the loquat specifically? Thank you. I understand all that about the fruits, but I know some can be grown from seed and I never know which ones. Barbados cherry is an example, not a good example because it's not a tree, but it obviously.
Yeah. So loquat you can grow from seed, but there are some loquats that are very sour, there are some that are more sweet. So if you're gonna grow one, pick one that's more sweet, if that's what you like, and then hopefully it will come out sweet, but it will take a long time to flower and fruit.
Okay.
But you can do it, sure.
Right. No, I meant something that would, give you a fruit in 2 to 3 years, but it sounds like everything should be just bought from a nursery. So that's fine.
I'm trying to think of some. You can do it. It'll just take a while. I can't really think of one.
Okay.
Sugar apple. Sugar apple is one that you could do. That'll work.
And papayas too are pretty popular with seed growing.
You. Yeah, papaya is almost always from seed. Thank you, Brian. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Your other question was, how long did it take the seed grape you planted to fruit? I didn't really pay attention, so I would guess about 10 years, but I don't know. So Amy asks, what advice do you have for building up and creating levels in a Miami Beach yard without interfering with soil drainage? Ooh, that's tough. Yeah, because you guys out there, you have a different, you're sort of, Miami Beach is just fill. You know, it's not, I don't think it's ever been a soil. So to build that up, I would use mulch. I would use a lot of mulch to build that up. Maybe even build, you know, like you would a raised bed for a vegetable garden, build something like that, but much bigger for your fruit trees. Because once those roots get in the salty soil for fruit trees, not good, but obviously like cocoa plum and coconuts and a lot of the natives, they can do well. But I'm a big fan of mulch, so I would use mulch.
All righty. Does anyone have any more questions for Jeff? All right. Well, I think that might be it.
Okay. Awesome.
Jeff, thanks so much for coming on today. That was a very informative presentation, and some of those concepts I haven't considered, but maybe it's time for reshuffling of a couple of things in the yard. But
yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I've used my saw plenty of times to correct mistakes.
yeah, I'm gonna have to get the courage to do that. It kills me every time I have to take something out. But
yeah, I know. All right, thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, and thanks everyone for coming on tonight. I hope everyone has a great rest of your night and rest of your week, and we will see you next month. Have a good one, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks, James.